This is Kay Rudolph. Today's presentation is the first in a series based on an article published by John Colletta, research done by John Colletta, that he published in the 2005 National Genealogical Society Quarterly on J.W. Parberry. And I chose this as a case study for a series of presentations because he does a very good job of laying out how he uses the genealogical proof standard to guide his research and how he uses it to evaluate his conclusions. So we'll be covering this one article over a series of presentations. In part one of this Parberry case study, we're going to get a general overview of the process of framing a research plan, gathering the starting information, and deciding where to go to conduct our reasonably exhaustive search. I'll be paying particular attention to newspaper research, using censuses, locating gravestones, and finding land records. And as we go through Colletta's research, we will examine the process of verifying and evaluating conclusions that we draw from the records that we've found. John started out with very limited information. He was actually researching his ancestor, George Ring, who owned a store that burned down in 1873. 6 people were found murdered in the store. And John started out with court case files from the insurance case that arose as a result of this fire. From the court records, there were references to a J.W. Parberry, also known as Dr. Parberry and variously as Mr. Parberry. He was listed as a veterinarian. It was noted that he shared a log cabin with Uncle Jimmy the Irishman, who didn't have any other description. And he was sharing the cabin with Uncle Jimmy on the 4th of March, 1873, when the Rolling Fork murders happened. The two men had stopped at the store before the night of the fire, bought a bottle of whiskey, retired to their cabin. J.W. Parberry was not available by November of 1874, about a year and a half later, when the sheriff went to serve a summons to him to testify in the insurance case. Given how newsworthy this event was, the first step would be to collect newspaper accounts of the fire itself. Through those accounts, it might be possible to get some additional information about the J.W. Parberry who was mentioned in the court records. So, how do you go about finding newspapers? Well, first off is you want to look at a map. Where is this location that you're researching? It would be lovely if there happened to be lots of newspapers published in the town itself, but you can't always count on that. So you want to look at the towns in the vicinity of it that might have also published newspapers. So here we have Rolling Fork, we have nearby Yazoo, we have Vicksburg down here, we have Jackson. So these are the places that we're going to look for published newspapers. So, which newspapers covered Rolling Fork? A good place to start is the Library of Congress website, Chronicling America. You'll see in the top right corner this sort of lavender purple link to the U.S. newspaper directory, 1690 to the present. This is essentially the index to what newspapers were. Well, it's the directory of newspapers as far as is humanly known, the newspapers that have been published between 1690 and today. So when we click on that, you can search for the state, Mississippi, Sharkey County is where Rolling Fork is today. And so if you want to specify Rolling Fork, you have to specify Sharkey County rather than the Issaquena County, where Rolling Fork was originally in 1873, before the new county was formed and the boundaries changed. We select the time period when the newspaper was published, and we go and we hit our search. And we get nothing. Okay, that happens. So let's try something else. The Stanford Data Visualization Project is awfully nice because they've taken the information in that database that we just looked at from the Library of Congress, and they have put it into a map for us. So we'll be able to look and see what newspapers were in the vicinity of Rolling Fork. So we go down here, we can actually set the time, the date, to 1873, and then we'll scroll in to the vicinity of Rolling Fork. And here we have Vicksburg is this large circle. Rolling Fork would be somewhere about up in this area. So we can see that we'd look as Vicksburg would be one possibility. Down here, when we highlight that circle for Vicksburg, down in this lower left section, it opens up a listing of the newspapers in that newspaper directory for the time period 1873 that covered the Vicksburg, Mississippi area. That doesn't necessarily mean that they were only published there. Like today, people in Connecticut read the New York Times. It was published in New York, but it contains information far beyond the borders of New York. So we can see we've got the Vicksburg News was a weekly in English. The Daily Vicksburg was a daily except Monday in English. And so there's a variety of different newspapers that might have covered the fire. Let's take a look at the Memphis Weekly Appeal, published 1861 to 1885, a weekly in English. When you click on that, it opens up the page in the Chronicling America website that you saw earlier, and you see here we have a thumbnail, actually a bit larger than a thumbnail, of a newspaper. This indicates that this Memphis Daily Appeal is available in digitized form online. So if we select the Memphis Daily Appeal, we can go in and we can do a search of that to find the specific issue. And so what I've done here is I've gone to the advanced search, I've selected the newspaper, I've left my time period as 1836 to 1922. I am searching with all the words ring and fire because it would certainly mention that there was a fire at the store of George Ring, the phrase Rolling Fork, and I'm not going to take advantages of these other search options. We'll do that at another time. So I go ahead and search, and we have 17 results containing ring and fire in the phrase Rolling Fork. Let's take a look. Here we have a detailed article, The Rolling Fork Horror, additional particulars from the scene of the fiendish act of murder and arson. The charred remains of Jesse Moore, Mrs. Moore. So it's giving us a lot of details about the event. Scrolling down, we have here Mrs. Cocker was disturbed by means unknown to her, and on awakening proceeded to the gallery of her house, saw the store of her son-in-law in flames, from one end to the other, just falling in. Soon after, Mr. Parberry came upon the scene, being attracted by the light. So we're getting some more details about this fellow Parberry. Now, John Colletta, why was he interested in Parberry? Well, there'd be a number of reasons. One is that he was part of the community that George Ring lived in, and John likes to add some flesh to the bare bones of names, dates, and locations by exploring the communities people lived in. Also, it's a little bit suspicious about this Mr. Parberry, who is so quick on the scene of a fire. But to go to the end of the story, there was a thorough investigation, and from what I understand from John Colletta, they did identify the likely culprits, though they were not able to capture them, and Mr. Parberry is not involved in that. So, are there any other papers that might have addressed the event? Well, we can go back to Vicksburg, Mississippi on the Stanford Data Visualization Project, and we can check the Vicksburg Times. This was published 1866 to 75, daily except Monday, in English. Now, you'll notice over here we don't have any icon. That means that this item is not available online through the Chronicling America website. What we can do is we can click on this link, Libraries That Have It, and that's going to give us information about where we can look at microfilm or original copies. And this is available in original copies covering the period 1873 January 1st to 1875 April 26th. There might be copies covering the time period, covering the Rolling Fork fire, but we'd have to either visit the Library of Congress or we would have to make arrangements for somebody to do a lookup for us. Now, here's a great website, the ancestorhunt.com. What these folks have done is they have created a directory of online newspaper collections sorted by geographic location. And this covers not just the United States, but also world collections. So let's take a look at their section on Mississippi online historical newspapers. They have articles that explain the status of the newspaper collections. For example, Mississippi is one of the states that does not have a central online state repository for searching historical newspapers. That's good to know, so we won't have to go searching for something that doesn't exist. So you'll want to take a look and read these articles rather than just jump straight to the links. Get a little background on this record set that you're trying to work with. Scrolling down, we see some options for places where you can locate Mississippi newspapers. And there are several recommendations, such as the Mississippi Department of Archives and History. Lots of terrific, useful information here. So now we've gathered all the information that we can conceivably gather about J.W. Parberry related to this specific event. We have a particular research question in mind. Who was J.W. Parberry, who was present in Rolling Fork on a specific date in 1873, who was known to be a veterinarian, who is referred to as Dr. Parberry, who appeared to be an unmarried male? So our question is, who was this man, where did he come from, and where did he go when he left Rolling Fork? So this is the phase one of our research question. first thing we want to do is we want to get in our minds all of the different variations that we might find used for the spelling of his name. Be very flexible about how you expect to find a name spelled. Until the 20th century, people really weren't that particular about spellings, and certainly the people who were making records weren't always as careful about spelling a name properly. So we're looking for a bunch of variants for the name Parberry. We're looking for the period 1860s through the 1880s, and we're going to focus, beginning this research in phase 1, on Issaquena County, where Rolling Fork was in 1873, and any parent county was Issaquena formed of another county, and any children counties. Did Issaquena break up into other counties after 1873? First place that you go when you're starting to research a new question and you're working with a new location, you want to go to the Family Search Wiki and read the article for that location. There's just a treasure trove of information there. For example, you'll see in the sidebar we have direct links to information about the parent county, boundary changes, and variant spellings of the county's name. It was created in 1844 from Washington County. That pretty much predates our period of interest, so we're not going to have to really worry about Washington County. The neighboring counties, we do want to keep an eye on these. And boundary changes for animated maps illustrating county boundary changes. You can see these at the Map of US or mapofus.org website. And this is a handy little website in order to check whether your ancestor, by staying in one place, still managed to move from one county to another. So, for example, we're looking at the location of Rolling Fork in Mississippi in 1873, and it is in the northeast corner of Issaquena County. However, by 1876, that section of Issaquena County had been chopped off to form Sharkey County. So, for records after 1876, we would need to look at Sharkey County records. So, looking at Colletta's reasonably exhaustive search, this is what is expected of thorough research. He checked the various records, including deed books, tax rolls, court records, circuit and chancery court volumes, probate, other available court records. He focused on the Myersville Courthouse in Issaquena County, the Rolling Rock Courthouse in Sharkey County, which began in 1876, and he also paid attention to the Vicksburg Courthouse down in Warren County. He checked the Vicksburg Daily Times. He checked the Mississippi State Census for 1866, as well as the federal U.S. Census for 1870. He checked additional record sets that were available to him, like the federal postmaster appointments in Issaquena, records of Mississippi election in 1875. He looked at published record compilations. In later videos, we'll take a look at how to locate these, but he checked the early Mississippi records, the 5-volume set by Branton and Wade. He checked the local history by John Willis. He also consulted with a local historian who had expertise on the Rolling Fork neighborhood. Speaking to real people really does need to be on our list of things to do. After all of that, he found nothing. And that's something that we're all very familiar with. But he did find something in the 1880 census. This was the first census after the 1873 fire. Now remember that JW had left the Rolling Fork area by 1874. Doing a search, just a global search for J.W. Parberry, looking for a residence in 1880, so that we'll restrict it to the 1880 census. We have what appears to be 1,800 possible results. But let's take a look. The first one, J.W. Parberry, is an exact match. It is in Chula City, Holmes County, Mississippi. Where is that exactly? I frequently go back to Google Maps in order to get a sense of where places are in relation to each other, because it pops up with this information about driving miles, which is an approximation, but it does let me know that Chula, Mississippi is about 50 to 60 miles away from Rolling Fork. That's not an incredible distance for an individual to travel in the late 1800s. So taking a closer look at this entry for J.W. Parberry, he is a male, 52 years old, and a doctor. Now, the likelihood of there being two men named J.W. Parberry, who are both referred to as doctor, living in that area of Mississippi is pretty remote. So I think we're fairly confident in starting out with a hypothesis that this might be our J.W. Parberry. His parents and he himself were born in Virginia. So we want to know now, we want to find a way to confirm, is this our J.W. Parberry from the Rolling Fork fire? We're going to do the same kind of a search that we did for J.W. in Issaquena County. We're going to now transfer that search to Holmes County. We want in particular to find out, is there, contrary to the laws of probability, a second man in Mississippi who has the same name and the same occupation? So we have to consider all of the possible variants for the spelling of the name. We're going to look for things like gravestones, land records, probate records, and we're going to check the county history as well as any modern histories. Gravestones. How do you go about finding gravestones? We're going to take a short detour into the whole issue about what resources are available to us for finding gravestones. First and foremost is the Find a Grave website. Second, and coming strong, is Billion Graves. Both of these are indexed through Ancestry.com and through FamilySearch.org. I'm not sure if Billion Graves is indexed through Family Search. Now, we often forget about the U.S. Gen website. Every state participates in the GenWeb project, and most counties participate as well. These are sites where volunteer genealogists have transcribed records or tombstones and uploaded them to their county's website. So we're looking here at the Tombstone Transcription Project for Holmes County, Mississippi. And you can see that there are quite a number of cemeteries. Kona Cemetery, Antioch, Bagley, Bailey, and it goes on. When you open one of these, you can see that the names are alphabetized with information drawn from the tombstones. Well, is there a way that we can search all of these transcriptions at one time without having to open up the file for every single cemetery? Yes, there is. We're going to use the site search function on Google search. Go up to the top and you'll see that the URL for the page we're looking at, the Acona Cemetery transcription, is files.usg.archives.net/ms/homes/cemeteries/ the name of the specific file, Acona 1. We're going to copy that stub. We're going to copy everything except for the actual file name of this Acona text file. We're going to then insert the whole long list of our possible spellings, Parberry or Porberry or Parberry or Parberry or Parberry or Porberry. I have those in parentheses so that it knows, Google search knows, that I am interested in any one of those words showing up in the file. I leave a space and then I have the word site, colon, and I paste that stub that I copied earlier. What this is going to do is it's going to search for every single file that is in that stub, and it is going to search for one of these words. Here's a closer look of what your search is going to look like. Well, it's a good thing that we did that, because it turns out that there were no entries for any Parberries or Porberries of any kind. So it saved us a little bit of work using that site search. Let me give you another look at that. So you list your search terms, then site, colon, and you list the URL stub that will lead the name of any file that you want searched. All right, so let's go back to our wiki. We've made no progress with gravestones. Let's go and take a look at the land records and probate records and local history. The wiki is going to be our starting place for that. Now, an important section to look at in the article has to do with record loss. There's a note that an 1884 courthouse fire destroyed many records. For a list of record loss in Mississippi counties, see, and there is a link. The blue is a hot link that will take us to another article. Let's click on that, and we are at the Random Acts of Genealogical Kindness website, where somebody has put up a comprehensive list of Mississippi counties with burned courthouses. It notes Holmes County Courthouse, a courthouse fire in 1884, destroyed many of the records, but deeds were housed in a separate building, and Will Book 1 was rescued. So you see the value of double checking and not just taking that initial 1884 fire destroyed everything report. Continuing on in the wiki, there is a link about Mississippi land and property records with a link to a viewable collection of land records. There is a link to local histories on Mississippi counties. There is a section, there is a section on probate records with a link to articles about probate records as well as viewable collections. Taxation, we have a link to tax rolls that don't cover the period that we're interested in. Sometimes that will happen. And some information that is very useful to us about vital records. Mississippi law did not require keeping birth or death records until 1912. So there's no point in our searching for a death record unless we expect that he died after 1912. So let's take a look at the land records. Looking at that article on Mississippi land and property, it explains where the records were kept, who had jurisdiction. After original title to the land was granted, deeds, mortgages, and subsequent transactions have been recorded in county offices. In Mississippi, county land records have been kept by the Chancery Court since the creation of each county. So now we know the court that has jurisdiction, and we know that they are maintained at the county level. Now, we didn't find a link to the online records, so we're going to go to the catalog and see what we can find there. So we do a search for Mississippi, Holmes County, and we look through the category listings for land and property, and we find a collection called Land Records 1824 to 1959, indexes 1832 to 1903, 1824 to 1959. And we get all excited because it says, click here to view online, but this is for probate records. And that's not what we're looking for. So we're going to scroll down, and we're going to look at the list of microfilm. And we can see here by the camera icon that this collection from microfilm 1977561, items 1 through 3, has been digitized and put online. It has not been indexed, so we would have to actually go and look at it. We're going to have to click on this camera icon. So we do that, and we get photo not available. What this suggests is that this is one of these collections that has been digitized. It is online, but you can only view it at a family history center. So we're going to want to note in our log that we want to go back to this collection the next time we're at the local family history center. And I keep a websites to recheck log on my desktop on a Word document, so that I keep a list of all of the items that I can't check at home but will need to check when I get to the Family History Center. Next, when Wiki fails, Google it. In this case, we're looking for Holmes County, Mississippi land records. Let's see what Google says. I love Google because it corrects my misspellings for me and lets me double check, did I really mean what I wrote, or did I mean what I thought I was typing? So we've got a few possibilities. Here's the Holmes County article that we had just read. But we're going to follow that link to the Chancery Clerk. Remember, we read that the Holmes County records, the land records in Mississippi, were in the jurisdiction of the Chancery Court. And so we look at the Holmes County Chancery Clerk website, and we look at their fact list, frequently asked questions. How do I search land records? And we're not seeing a link to these records being online. That's unfortunate. For the moment, until September, we can go back to the Family Search website and we can order these microfilm. $7.50 a pop, but it sure beats having to drive up to Mississippi. Unfortunately, after September, that option won't be available, as Family Search is discontinuing the rental program for microfilm and dedicating their resources to getting more microfilms digitized and online. So this is something to, if it's desperately needed, I would go in and order them now. It might be some period of time before they'll be available digitally through their website. What did John Colletta find? No gravestone, no probate records, no mention in local histories, but he did find 3 deeds from 1876. He found an April 1876 for a James W Parberry purchasing an interest in lots in Durant in East Holmes County, and then a few months later J.W. Parberry signing over the properties, apparently to cover a debt. So is this R. Parberry? The name in the 1880 Holmes County census is identical to the name that we saw listed in Rolling Fork Court newspaper articles. In both cases, in the records that we had from the 1873 and in the 1876 and 1880 J.W. Parberry, we have a single man who is sharing a residence with another single man. Chula is 60 miles from Rolling Fork, and the Rolling Fork Parberry was a veterinarian referred to as Dr. Parberry, the same as the Holmes County Parberry. So we can be very confident that we have identified our J.W. Parberry. So what do we do next? Or what do we know now? We know his first name. It's James. We know that from the deeds. We know when he was born. He was born in 1828 or 1829 in Virginia, of parents born in Virginia. So we have that from the 1880 census. So what happened to James W. Parberry? Colletta hit a brick wall after the 1880 census and wasn't able to locate any further information. But new resources come online every day, and this is something that we really need to remember. And this is especially true of newspapers. So let's go back to Chronicling America, and now let's do a search for the state of Mississippi, looking at that time period, 1875 to 1922, and we're going to do a search for the name Parberry. We could alternatively have chosen to search for Parberry, Porbury, Purbury, and so forth, but his name has been so consistently spelled Parberry that I was comfortable just doing a search for that single word. And what do we have? We have 16 results containing that name. Let's take a closer look at these. We're looking at the Grenville Times in Grenville, Mississippi, 1897, 1896. They are petitions for liquor licenses. So this is a record set that I had never imagined. Well, I guess it shows my upbringing, but it is a great it's a great resource. When somebody applied for a liquor license, they would need to have a petition of local citizens sign in support of their license request, and that petition would be published in the newspaper. And so here we are looking at a petition from March 1896, and down there we have James W Parberry. So now we know his middle name as well. We have 1890, we have a J.W. Parberry, still in Grenville, Mississippi. Another one signed by James W Parberry. 1895, another petition. 1896, another petition. 1897, we have the petition signed by James W Parberry. 1898, so it fits in with the idea of J.W. Parberry and Uncle Jimmy the Irishman, who stopped at the store to buy a bottle of whiskey. J.W. Parberry is still buying bottles of whiskey. So what about the 1900 census? We've got him in 1898 living in Grenville, Mississippi. Do we find him there in the 1900 census? Well, we did a search using the Ancestry website. I like that because it lets us search by county. It lets us search by county and surrounding counties. So we did an exact search for a James W, leaving the surname blank, but we were looking for a James W born around 1829 plus or minus, born exactly in Virginia. And we didn't really find anything. I did a search for JW with the same parameters and didn't really find anything. None of the searches that I tried came up with anybody who fit the profile. It appears that Parberry died sometime between 1898 and 1900. Probably in Grenville, Mississippi. So, pulling together all that we know, J.W. Parberry, James W. Parberry, now we know it's James W Parberry. Dr. Parberry was a veterinarian. He bought land in 1876, did not hold it long. He was born in 1828 or 1829 in Virginia, of parents born in Virginia. And he had a predilection for supporting anybody who was applying for a liquor license in Grenville between 1890 and 1898. So the next question that we're going to cover in the next video is, where did he come from? Where was James W. Parberry before 1873?